Thank you, Ethan. Well, thank you all for staying until the end of this session. We'll be discussing collaboration, which has been the topic mentioned in quite a number of panels. But how do you do it at a European level? How do you put that in the strategies that we have? This is what we will be discussing with Dolores. Dolores, thank you so much for coming to Paris. You came from Mallorca. And tell us a bit more about how we're doing this at a European level.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's great to be here. And well, I like it very much, the previous panel, because at the end, David was mentioning something very important, is how everybody has to work together. So because when we are in the tourism sector, everybody mentions about data. So you know that everybody's struggling with this data, how to make a better use of this data. And the European Union was aware of that. At the beginning, it was hard to introduce tourism in this, all this European jargon. But now, European Union has decided to fund what they call data spaces, which is also a fancy word, but what is behind, it's, as you mentioned, a great collaboration. So we are working together, 13 member states. We are 43 entities from different levels of the tourism value chain. And by the way, EONA-X is one of the main actors.
That's it. We're talking about an initiative. If you haven't heard of it, look for DEPLOYTOUR. This is this project which is over 3 years, which EONA-X is very proud to be part of, with great partners that are trying to work on 5 pilots that are there to showcase how data, AI, these technologies can come and support the industry for all actors in different locations. Maybe you can tell a bit more about the use cases, the pilots that are being done in this project?
Yeah, indeed, and also to mention that for AnySolution as an SME, it's a great pleasure to be the coordinator of this project, because when we decide which were going to be these 5 pilots, of course, you know that the geographical location, it's very important, but also the typology of tourism, because when we are discussing about tourism, it's not just leisure that it could be. So you think that I'm from Mallorca, so everybody thinks on the same activities when you are thinking about Mallorca. But one of the locations is the Canary Island, Andalucía, and Mallorca, the Balearic Islands, because there we are going to work in everything related to mature destinations. So those are destinations that receive thousands of millions of tourists. So you imagine the Balearic Islands, 1,100,000 inhabitants. This year we are going to receive 19 million tourists. So how are we going to continue working to be attractive, to be sustainable, resilient, but at the same time to generate this balance with the residents? So this is going to be one of them. Then we will have one related to cultural heritage with Greece, then one cross-border in which Slovenia and Italy, because at the end the tourists, they don't matter about the borders. And then we will have this empowerment of SME in Lapland. And then another very important one related with what we are doing here today is the MICE tourism.
Yes, this is a particular pilot that EONA-X is proud to be working on, a pilot which is in the Paris region. As you know, the Paris area is a keen location for MICE tourism. MICE is Meeting, Incentive, Congress, Events, all this industry which brings business travelers from around the world to our destination. And basically, we want to know, what do they do before? How do they come? How do we measure the impact, the economical impact, the environmental impact that they have on the destination? Will they come back with their families and do what we call bleisure, business and leisure? So all these questions are questions that the industry is asking itself all over Europe. And I think data should not be seen necessarily as a technical thing. It's an information. And through solutions like AI, we might be able to solve some of these difficulties. We're doing it in the project DEPLOYTOUR, which I mentioned, and in EONA-X. These are digital infrastructures that have this name of data spaces. You mentioned it. Maybe we could take a little moment, we still have a little time, just to explain a little bit what data spaces mean. Would you be able to differentiate maybe what a data space is from a data lake, which was mentioned earlier?
Yes, at the end, what it's very interesting about data spaces is that all the actors, they don't need to give the data. And I think this is the most important thing. So data space are decentralized infrastructures or solutions, because at the end we are still discussing how this is going to be organized. And what we want is that the main European values as interoperability, digital sovereignty, the ownership of all this data, who's going to have the control of my data, what I'm going to do with all this data. If I'm in a data space and I put my data in a catalog, what I'm putting is just the description of the data set. I'm not including the full data set. And this is the big difference with a data lake. In a data lake, all the owners of the data have to bring their own data there. So they don't know what's going to happen with their data, who's going to use it, for which purposes. But in the data space, the owners of the data, they are going to keep the control of the data. There are going to be controls in terms of regulations, agreements. So what we want also is, and you mentioned, is to make it easy especially for the tourism actors, but especially for the SMEs. So we cannot forget that at the end of the day, 95% of the business ecosystem are SMEs. So how are we going to engage them in this ecosystem? So we really need that they don't see all the back office, so they don't see how complex it is to generate interoperability. And you know a lot of that because you are not only in DEPLOYTOUR, you are also in DEPLOY-MDS, how different data spaces can interact together, and perhaps you can explain a little bit about that.
For sure. DEPLOY-MDS is another project, but it's a similar infrastructure in the mobility sector. EONA-X has chosen to break silos between different sectors. Mobility and tourism go together, logistics as well, and by bringing actors that have, of course, a relationship but don't necessarily interact that much together in collaboration. These digital infrastructures are there to unlock the value of data. I think it's useful to say that today, a lot of this data that we're talking about is not internet data that can be scraped, but industrial data. And the situation today is that 80% of this industrial data is not shared today. And with the rise of connected objects, all this industrial data is taking actually more space than the data that is on the internet. One day, I think there will be more data from this industrial data than what we have on the internet. And therefore, we need to think of a reuse of this data and new ways to make AI use this data as well for improving conditions, digital twins, machine learning, all these buzzwords that you hear. You can't do that by scraping data. You really have to have the quality data, maybe less, but better quality data. And I think data is not necessarily what people want to discuss. There's the governance of data. These are things that are not fun. Necessarily, they're hard. It's a question of governance. There's lots of legislation. But it's really the foundations of a trustworthy AI. And when we speak of sovereignty, it's not necessarily brandishing a flag, but really of putting back the choice for SMEs, public institutions, for all an ecosystem of actors. And I think this is a way of putting the word collaboration into a very pragmatic way. And well, mobility and tourism is, of course, linked, and we're trying to see how we can do synergies on that. Interoperability is key in this sector.
Yeah, and if you allow me, so we are now in this nice event about AI, and now is the word, so everybody speaks about AI, but we cannot have good AI without good data. And how these models are being trained, because sometimes we forget that AI is just a huge amount of data that is trained, and we get the models, and who is training these models and based on which data. So I think data spaces are going also to ensure this trust. So because we are going to ensure, you mentioned quality data, but also the ownership of this data. And this is very important to understand how this data is going to be used. And this is very important also for the data providers. So there are a lot of factors that they are owners of huge amount of data, but they are worried about sharing this data because they don't know who's going to use this data for which purposes. And we can imagine any actor in the tourism value chain. And I think this is very important. So another important thing, and you mentioned about interoperability, is the semantic interoperability. And in tourism, this is something in which we are going to work a lot, also in DEPLOYTOUR, because you know that there is this initiative at UN Tourism, but when UN Tourism needs to get agreements at a global level and sometimes are complicated, so perhaps DEPLOYTOUR is going to give a step further to this evolution of the semantic interoperability, working directly with the tourism stakeholders. Because I think David mentioned in the previous session, if you want that the Aéroport de Paris, Air France, and any other actor works together and share this data in order to improve the satisfaction of the tourists and make this experience smooth, and we can change from one flight to another, or we arrive to the airport and we know which is the train we have to take, and we know which is the hotel we have to go, and this is smooth, and all this data is shared along all our journey, I think our experiences will be great. But this will mean that many actors behind the scenes are going to be able to share this data based on clear conditions. And I think this playground is going also a very important part of the data space.
You mentioned AI and Gen AI in particular. I think if we're following the title of our fireside chat here on collaboration, now that we have this foundation of data spaces and trust, it's been installed, governance, this is the time to well, use it and to see how agents, generative AI, can actually make the travel smoother. The name was mentioned a bit before. I would like to take a moment just to tell you a bit more about a project which we will be doing as well in the MICE, like in DEPLOYTOUR, but also in other use cases, which is called Gen for Travel. Generative AI agents that will use, of course, this trust to work together and make the travel smoother. This is a project we were very proud to announce. It was announced just last Friday by the Minister of Tourism, Serge Papin, and EONA-X and the Gen for Travel are now France 2030, supported by this program with a consortium that will be working with some of our members, and will be working as well with Mistral AI, with Lina Gora on this project for about 2 years. And well, we will be trying to bring this usage of data into AI agents for 3 types of use cases. The first one you mentioned is, how do you get inspiration? How can you have all the actors of the value chain represented, from the large companies that will do airline companies to the small activity that rents bicycles, for instance. So how do we integrate all of that? We will also have another use case in the disruption of travel. When everything goes well, no problem, but as soon as you have a difficulty in your trip, you will find yourself being the traveler, the one to organize everything. Hopefully with AI agents, you might get some help from technology to give you more options and help you get a smoother trip. And finally, when you're a person that is in a situation where you're handicapped, well, how do you get that information through the whole value chain that you need assistance, and how do you manage to have a smoother journey? So I think, as a conclusion, this collaboration is not just a buzzword. It is really something that is brought at a European level. We think that in the coming European tourism strategy, coming next year, we will definitely hear about it. You just came back from Brussels. And we will see some really concrete applications coming soon in this area. So keep in mind DEPLOYTOUR, Gen for Travel, EONA-X, and maybe a word to finish, Dolores?
Yeah, what it's important is to mention that this is not just an invention, because we consider that it's important to work in sharing data, because well, we thought one morning, oh wow, can we share data? It's because it has a value behind. So data spaces were born to generate a new added value and also to generate new business models. And I think this is important for everybody to understand that. It's not just for public administration, but it allows this collaboration among public and private actors. And the European tourism strategy is going to have as an important point, as an important key pillar, data spaces. Data spaces are not going to stop in 2027. There is already an approval of the next program, so it will run at least until 2030. So I think it's a great opportunity for everybody to be aware, because we are going to onboard new members, and everybody interested in sharing data is more than welcome. Please go to our website, come to us, and we are here to open the doors and to explain how can we collaborate together. Thank you.
Great words. Thank you. Back to you, Ethan. Thank you so much for listening, and thanks for your interest.